The fortress hung in silence above the red giant, its colossal frame carved from alloys older than human memory. Whole civilizations had lived and died under its shadow, and yet none had dared to touch the figure that crowned its hull, a woman wrought in alien steel, her face serene, her wings folded close as though waiting for a command that never came. The Dragon Lady, she was called. For 150 years she had remained unmoving, wings sealed, her mystery untouched. Those who had tried to disturb her were said to vanish, their ships consumed by the fortress, or their minds shattered by visions too vast to name. Legends spread faster than truth, and in time, even bold men grew hesitant to test her silence. Commander Kael Ardent had heard every story. In the officers' mess, he had watched men lower their voices when the Dragon Lady's name was spoken, as though the statue itself listened. He had been warned that curiosity would kill him, as it had those before him, but Kael had never been one to let fear dictate his steps. He was 37 years old, scarred by battles both won and lost, carrying with him the reputation of a man too stubborn to know when to kneel. His peers called him reckless, his superiors called him necessary. He considered both assessments correct. When the message came that he would be the first human officer granted passage into the fortress of the Zerath, Kael had felt the weight of history press into his chest. Diplomats had begged for this privilege for decades, but the alien commander Zerath Veyl had refused them all. Why Kael had been chosen was a question that gnawed at him during the long voyage. He was no diplomat, no smooth-tongued envoy. He was a soldier who carried orders like burdens and believed defiance was sometimes the only form of loyalty worth showing. Perhaps that was what had caught the alien's attention. Zerath Veyl stood taller than any human Kael had ever seen, his skin like burnished silver, eyes deep as black holes. There was nothing frail in him, nothing uncertain. He wore authority as easily as others wore armor, and the halls of the fortress bent to his presence. The first time Kael met him, no words were exchanged. Veyl merely regarded him, as though weighing whether this human was worthy of standing on ground that had swallowed empires. Kael met the gaze without flinching, though it felt like staring into the heart of a storm. It was on the third day that Kael found himself before the Dragon Lady. The tour had been selective, corridors narrowed by design, rooms curated to impress but reveal little. Yet when a sealed door opened at Veyl's command, Kael knew this chamber was different. The statue rose taller than a warship, wings pressed against her back, every feather etched with patterns that glimmered faintly in the light. She was both beautiful and terrifying, her stillness demanding reverence. Kael's throat tightened despite himself. This was no simple decoration. This was a warning written in metal and silence. He remembered the stories his grandfather told him as a boy, of sailors who feared sea monsters until one man had the gall to dive into the depths, proving the monsters were only shadows of the mind. Humanity, his grandfather said, survived not because it was the strongest, but because it refused to accept that any frontier was closed. That memory now pressed against him as he studied the folded wings. Why had no one dared in a century and a half? Was the fear justified, or had terror become a cage passed down from one generation to the next? Veyl's voice broke the silence, low and cold. "She is not for you, human." Kael did not turn. "Then why bring me here?" The alien commander stepped closer, the sound of his armor echoing against the chamber walls. "So that you may learn restraint. Knowledge has slain more civilizations than war. The wings stay folded because the stars demand it." Kael finally turned, meeting the obsidian eyes. "Or because you fear what lies beyond them." For a moment, Veyl's expression flickered, the barest fracture in an otherwise perfect mask. Then it was gone, replaced by that same granite calm. "Do not mistake curiosity for courage, Commander. There is a line between them, and those who cross it are buried by what they awaken." The words should have chilled him, but instead Kael felt the old, familiar fire stir in his chest. Fear had preserved the Dragon Lady's wings for 150 years, but fear had also kept humanity shackled to myths, locked away from truths that could change their place in the stars. He stepped closer to the statue, his hand lifting as though of its own accord, fingers hovering just short of the folded feathers. The metal seemed to hum beneath his skin, faint vibrations whispering of secrets older than both their species. Behind him, Veyl's voice hardened. "Do not touch her." Kael's hand trembled in the air, caught between obedience and defiance. His pulse thundered, his breath shallow. He could almost hear his grandfather's words. "Frontiers are not walls, Kael. They are invitations." His heart pounded with the weight of choice, each second stretching longer than the last. He lowered his hand, letting the air cool against his palm. But the fire in him had not dimmed. The moment had carved itself into his marrow. He turned back to Veyl, masking defiance with a soldier's calm. "I understand." Veyl studied him, as though trying to decipher what lay behind the words. Then, with a motion of command, the chamber door closed, sealing the dragon lady once more in her eternal silence. As they left, Kael glanced over his shoulder, catching a final glimpse of the folded wings. He knew with absolute certainty that he would return. And when he did, he would not stop his hand. The fortress corridors stretched on, their shadows deep, but Kael's thoughts burned brighter than ever. He had seen the weight of taboo, felt the pull of forbidden truth. Whatever the alien commander believed, whatever the Council of Legends decreed, Kael knew one thing: humanity was not meant to fear folded wings. It was meant to see them spread. And somewhere in the silence of the fortress, the dragon lady seemed to wait, as if she, too, longed for the day someone dared to set her free. Kael had spent sleepless nights replaying the moment before the dragon lady's wings. The vibration beneath his hand, the hum like a heartbeat trapped in steel, haunted him. Every corridor he walked in the fortress seemed to echo the same truth. The wings were not dead matter but a sealed door, and he was standing on the threshold. His resolve, sharpened by defiance, grew each day he remained among the Zerath. He knew the alien commander watched him closely, weighing his every step, but Kael could no more abandon the thought of those wings than he could will his own lungs to stop drawing breath. When the chance finally came, it arrived with calculated cruelty. A gathering of delegates from lesser worlds had been arranged in the Hall of Triumph, a chamber vast enough to hold fleets within its ribbed arches. At its heart stood the dragon lady, her wings still folded in their eternal embrace. Zerath Veyl presided from a dais, his towering form clad in armor that gleamed like liquid moonlight. His voice carried through the hall, pronouncing unity, vigilance, the weight of heritage. Every phrase was precise, rehearsed, more a command than a plea. Kael stood among the audience, his uniform plain compared to the silks and metals of the alien dignitaries. Yet his eyes were not on the commander, they were fixed on the wings. The hall fell silent at the end of Veyl's address, silence filled with the unspoken reverence of 100 species. And then Kael moved. He stepped forward, boots striking against the polished floor, the sound echoing like drumbeats of defiance. A murmur swept the chamber, rising to startled cries as he crossed the invisible boundary that none had dared in 150 years. Veyl's voice thundered his name, but Kael did not stop. His hand touched the metal feathers, cold as the void, and pressed. For an instant nothing happened, and doubt lanced through him. Then the chamber shuddered. A tremor rippled up the statue, light searing along every etched line. Mechanisms older than empires awoke with a roar that shook the hall to its foundations. The wings stirred, grinding open with a force that felt like the birth of a star. Screams filled the air as delegates staggered back, shielding their eyes. Kael froze where he stood, not from fear of Veyl's wrath, but from the sight unfurling before him. As the wings spread, a radiance spilled forth, not flame nor metal, but living light. The patterns across the feathers blazed into clarity, forming a map that stretched beyond the chamber, beyond the fortress itself. Stars bloomed in impossible detail, constellations shifting like gears in some cosmic machine. At its center pulsed a path that wove through the void, vanishing into a darkness deeper than space itself. It was not merely a chart, it was a call. Kael's breath hitched as the vision flooded him. He felt as though the entire galaxy had turned to stare into his skull. The map whispered of horizons no one had reached, realms untouched by claw or blade, destinies hidden beyond the edge of reason. It was beautiful. It was terrible. It was infinite. And then the vision faltered. His knees buckled, his pulse hammering, his mind straining at the weight of immensity. He clung to a single truth to anchor himself. Humanity had always stood before the impossible and chosen to step forward. That stubbornness, more than strength, was its gift. The light dimmed, the wings settling into their new span, vast enough to dwarf the hall itself. The dragon lady no longer appeared dormant but alive, her wings a beacon daring the galaxy to follow. The chamber was deathly still. Every eye turned toward Kael, the man who had shattered a century and a half of silence. Zerath Veyl descended from his dais, each step reverberating like a tolling bell. His fury radiated from him, palpable as heat. Yet beneath it lay something sharper: fear. His gaze locked on Kael, and when he spoke, his words cut like blades. Do you understand what you have done? You have broken a covenant older than your species' first fire. That map was sealed because it is not a path to glory, but to ruin. Whole civilizations were lost to its lore. Kael struggled to steady his voice, the weight of the vision still crushing his skull. If the truth destroys us, then we deserve destruction. But if we survive it, then we prove ourselves worthy of more than chains. Gasps spread through the hall. Some looked at Kael with awe, others with horror. Veyl's hand flexed as though he wished to strike him down, but he restrained himself, his discipline unyielding. His voice dropped to a growl. You are reckless. You mistake defiance for strength. Do you think yourself the first to speak such words? The bones of those who believed as you do litter the stars. Kael met his gaze, forcing his trembling body to stand tall. Perhaps. But they were not human. For a long moment, silence stretched between them, as tense as drawn wire. Veyl's soldiers moved forward, weapons raised, yet the commander lifted a hand, halting them. He studied Kael as though staring at a fracture in destiny itself, torn between annihilating the man and acknowledging him. Finally, his words came, colder than the void. You will not leave this place free. You are now a prisoner of your own defiance. But mark this, human, if you survive what you have unleashed, then perhaps your kind deserves the ruin it courts. Chains of energy locked around Kael's wrists, searing hot. The delegates whispered in frantic tones, fear thick in the air. Kael's vision still swam with the afterimage of the map, its brilliance etched into the marrow of his mind. He did not resist as the guards dragged him from the hall, though his steps carried the weight of triumph. For the first time in a century and a half, the dragon lady's wings had spread. The impossible had been revealed. As the doors closed behind him, Kael caught one last glimpse of Veyl staring at the statue, his face unreadable. The alien commander's fury had been clear, but behind it lay something Kael recognized all too well. It was not hatred. It was not reverence. It was dread. And that, more than anything else, told Kael that humanity had touched a truth the galaxy was never meant to forget. The cell was carved from stone older than Kael's species, its walls pulsing faintly with embedded energy veins that hummed like restrained thunder. Chains of light bound his wrists, a constant burn that reminded him with every heartbeat of the choice he had made. He had spread the wings. He had looked into infinity. Now he sat in silence, awaiting the consequence. Sleep came in fractured bursts, each broken by flashes of the map imprinted behind his eyelids, its shifting constellations urging him onward even in captivity. When the door at last dissolved into vapor, it was not faceless guards who entered, but Zerath Veyl himself. The commander's frame seemed to fill the cell, his silvered skin catching the glow of the chains. He regarded Kael with the stillness of a predator weighing whether its prey was worth the strike. You should be dead, Veyl said at last, his voice like a verdict delivered by the stars themselves. The wings show no mercy. The visions they pour into the mind have destroyed every being who dared awaken them. And yet you sit here, scarred but breathing. Why? Kael forced a wry smile despite the ache in his skull. Maybe because humanity is too stubborn to know when to break. The alien's eyes narrowed, black and fathomless. Stubbornness is not strength. It is ignorance that has not yet met its cost. He paced once, the air around him vibrating with restrained fury. Then he stopped, his gaze sharpening. The High Council demands your execution. They say your defiance has placed not only your species, but countless others at risk. I argued for another path. Kael straightened, surprised. You argued for me? I argued for the trial of burden, Veyl corrected. If you are to claim worthiness to stare upon what no mind was meant to see, then you must endure the full weight of it. If you fail, your end will be swift. If you survive, he paused, his expression unreadable. Then perhaps the galaxy itself will decide what becomes of you. There was no hesitation in Kael's reply. I'll take the trial. Hours later, he was led into a chamber unlike any other, a cathedral of silence, where the Dragon Lady's image loomed not in steel but in living light. Her wings arched above, radiant and terrible, their span swallowing the room. Kael was placed at the center, the chains dissolved, leaving him bare to whatever came. Veyl stood at the edge, arms crossed, his posture rigid with both contempt and curiosity. The trial began, without warning. The wings shone, beams of light piercing into Kael's mind like molten needles. He staggered, gripping his head as visions poured into him. He saw stars devoured by darkness, civilizations burning in their own arrogance, fleets swallowed by void storms that sang with hunger. He felt their screams, the terror of billions, each thought searing into his marrow. His breath caught in his throat, his body trembling under the sheer enormity of knowledge not meant for mortal minds. The temptation to surrender, to collapse into oblivion, pressed at him with relentless force. His knees struck the ground, his vision dimming. Yet deep within the storm, he clung to a single ember, the stubborn creed that had carried humanity across oceans, deserts, and now the stars. We are fragile, yes, but we do not stop. He forced his mind to hold, to bear, to defy. The vision swelled, pressing harder, as if the wings themselves sought to break him. Kael roared, a raw sound that tore his throat, forcing his body upright. He embraced the pain, let the terror burn through him rather than crush him. And in that moment, the flood shifted. Amidst the ruins, he glimpsed not only destruction but creation, stars born from collapse, worlds seeded in the wake of devastation, new paths forged from endings. The wings were not a curse alone, they were a mirror of consequence, showing both ruin and possibility. Humanity's burden was to face both, and still choose to walk forward. The chamber fell silent. The light dimmed, leaving Kael standing, battered but unbroken, chest heaving with exhaustion. Sweat traced lines down his face, his eyes bloodshot yet alive. The Dragon Lady's wings folded slowly back into stillness, their glow fading into quiet repose. For the first time since Kael had met him, Zerath Veyl's mask of command cracked. His voice carried not scorn but something closer to wonder, though twisted with unease. No one has ever endured. Not Zairi, not the elders, not the prophets who built this fortress. They all shattered. And yet you, he cut himself short, his jaw tightening. What are you, human? Kael wiped blood from his lip, forcing his voice steady. Not more than any man. Just unwilling to bow. Veyl stared at him, silent for a long moment. Then he turned sharply, addressing the shadows where the unseen council watched through unseen eyes. You see it. The wings have chosen him. The burden does not crush his kind as it does ours. This changes everything. A voice echoed from the unseen gallery, resonant and ancient. It changes nothing. He is a threat, and threats must be ended. Kael's chest tightened, but before he could speak, Veyl raised a hand. His tone was iron.
No.
To destroy him is to destroy the one proof that the wings may not be a death sentence. He is dangerous, yes, but not because he brings ruin. He is dangerous because he brings choice. The chamber trembled faintly, as though the fortress itself acknowledged the weight of those words. The council withdrew into silence, leaving the decision hanging in the charged air. At last, Veyl approached Kael, his gaze locked, both admiration and menace entwined. You have defied the wings and survived. That makes you unique. But it also makes you my responsibility. You will not be free, Kael Ardent. You will walk a path that few can imagine, and if you falter, I will be the one to end you. Kael met the gaze without flinching, even as exhaustion threatened to drag him under. Then you'd better be ready to follow me a long way, Commander. Veyl's lips curved in the faintest echo of a smile, cold, unwilling, yet undeniable. Without another word, he turned and strode from the chamber, his cloak trailing like a shadow. Kael sank to one knee, breath ragged, his mind still echoing with visions of creation and ruin. He knew the council had not accepted him. They had merely delayed his death. But he also knew something deeper. The wings had opened for him, and they had not broken him. The path they revealed was his now, burned into his spirit. Humanity's defiance had carried him through. And as the chamber dimmed to darkness, Kael whispered to himself, almost a vow. If the wings lead to doom, then I'll make them lead to destiny. You said. Kael awoke in silence, his body still heavy from the trial, yet his mind sharper than it had ever been. The visions lingered, etched into him like scars made of light, ruin and genesis, horror and promise. He carried them now, a burden that could not be set down, a weight no one else had borne and lived. He knew the High Council would never accept him. Their fear was too deep, their reverence for the wings too rigid. But Zerath Veyl had not yet cast judgment, and it was Veyl's decision that mattered most. The alien commander summoned him to the Hall of Blades, a cavernous chamber where swords of fallen warriors lined the walls, trophies from wars stretching back millennia. Kael entered unshackled, his steps echoing against the floor. Veyl stood at the center, unarmored save for bracers of black steel, his stance that of a man prepared for battle. His eyes burned with a light Kael could not name, hatred, curiosity, perhaps both. You have endured where none should have, Veyl said, voice low, resonant. But endurance alone does not prove you. Strength must be tested in more than spirit. If you would claim the right to walk the path you have unsealed, then you must face me. Kael squared his shoulders. He knew what was being asked, a duel not of ceremony but of truth, where his very conviction would be measured in combat. He had no illusions of victory. Veyl was faster, stronger, a being sculpted by centuries of command and war. Yet Kael did not flinch. Then let's finish what we started, he said, his voice carrying into the chamber like a challenge hurled into the void. The fight began in a blur. Veyl struck with the precision of a predator, his blows heavy enough to shatter stone. Kael dodged, parried, his body screaming with the effort. Each impact jarred his bones, yet he refused to yield. He fought not with elegance, but with tenacity, every strike born of sheer refusal to fall. Veyl's expression remained unreadable, though his eyes sharpened with each exchange, as though measuring not Kael's body, but the fire that drove it. Minutes dragged into an eternity. Blood lined Kael's lip, his chest heaving, arms bruised and battered. A final strike sent him sprawling, his body crashing against the cold floor. Pain flared sharp, but still he rose, staggering upright. His vision swam, yet his gaze never left the commander. You don't stop, Veyl said, his tone caught between disdain and reluctant awe. Kael spat blood, forcing a ragged grin. That's the point. He lunged again, not with finesse, but with the desperation of a man who believed giving up was worse than death. His strike landed weakly, barely enough to bruise, but he stayed on his feet. And as he did, the hall began to change. The swords on the walls shimmered, the light bending, and above them the image of the dragon lady's wings flared once more, responding to the clash of wills. They spread wide, radiant, filling the chamber with their impossible brilliance. The star map revealed itself again, but this time it did not show only destruction. The lines shifted, expanding, pathways unfolding that had not been there before. Possibility itself seemed to reshape, as though the wings recognized Kael's defiance and answered it. The vision filled both men, striking them with equal force. Veyl faltered, his hand lowering mid-strike, his breath caught in disbelief. "This cannot be," he whispered, eyes wide. The wings do not respond to combat, they respond to conviction. Kael's knees nearly buckled, but he stood firm, his voice steady despite the blood in his mouth. "Then they've already given their answer. Humanity doesn't win because it's strong. It wins because it refuses to fall." The hall fell silent, but for the hum of the wings. Veyl stared at him, his fury cooled into something heavier, something Kael could not mistake. Respect. Reluctant, bitter, but undeniable. The alien commander's voice carried like iron striking stone. "You are dangerous, Kael Ardent. More dangerous than any fleet because you do not yield. That is what the void fears." Kael swallowed against the ache in his throat. Then maybe that's what the void needs to fear. The wings dimmed slowly, folding into stillness, their glow leaving behind only the echo of their revelation. Veyl straightened, his gaze sharp once more, but his voice no longer carried the edge of condemnation. "I should kill you. That would be justice, perhaps even mercy. But if I end you now, the wings will never open again. You have forced a choice upon me." He stepped closer, looming over Kael, his presence like the weight of mountains.
"Go, then.
Return to your kind. Carry the map etched into your soul. But know this, when the path you have unveiled swallows your species whole, when the void comes to claim you, it will be by your hand. And I will not save you." Kael met his gaze, exhausted yet unbowed. "I'm not asking you to save us. I'm saying we'll face it, whatever it is. That's all any of us can do." For the first time, Veyl inclined his head, the barest acknowledgement, a gesture that felt heavier than any threat. Then he turned and strode from the hall, his cloak flowing like a shadow. Kael stood alone, the ache in his body screaming louder than ever, but his spirit steady. He knew what he had done could not be undone. The wings had opened, and the path beyond had been revealed. It was a burden he carried now, a choice humanity could not ignore. Later, aboard the vessel that would return him to human space, Kael stood at the viewport, staring into the endless scatter of stars. The map still burned behind his eyes, pathways stretching into uncharted darkness. He whispered to himself, his voice almost lost to the hum of the engines. For 150 years, no one dared. Now humanity will. The stars glimmered, silent witnesses to his vow. Somewhere beyond them, the path waited, as perilous as it was promising. The dragon lady's wings had spread, and nothing in the galaxy would ever be the same. "You said,"